Thank you for joining Let's Meet Where We Eat, conversations with innovation and entrepreneurship leaders who specialize in food and nutrition. Our series is presented by Nourish Cafe and the Food and Nutrition Innovation Institute at the Tufts Friedman School for Nutrition Science and Policy. Enjoy. Thank you, everyone, for attending our Food and Nutrition Innovation Institute Lunch and Learn today. We're really excited to have as our guest today Henry Inez, who is the CEO and founder of Chainparency. Henry's also a member of the Food and Nutrition Innovation Council. So we're really excited, Henry, that you bring such an interesting perspective about supply chain to the work that all of us do at this very interdisciplinary council. We are going to spotlight Henry. We're going to let him present. I believe your colleague Juan is also going to say add some insight about the case studies you present. And then we can follow that up with some discussion. And we'll go from there. All right. So with that, Henry, I'm going to let you take it away.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you so much, Katie. And just appreciate the opportunity to be able to present to everybody here. Thanks all for tuning in. We got a lot that we want to kind of cover and share today. And we'll, kind of start a little bit about sort of just fundamentals on blockchain and then move into some use cases. And as Katie has mentioned, I have a friend and a colleague, Juan Baez, who represents Pro Natura, which is the largest and oldest conservation agency in Mexico. And to talk about some of the work we're doing. Also have some good friends here, Steve Tracy, who is an expert and professor in supply chain from Penn State, who may have some comments, and joined by my colleague, Bowen Lee, as well. So anyway, thanks again for tuning in, and I'll go ahead and share my screen and we can get started. Okay, great. So again, my name is Henry Inez. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called Chainparency, and we're based here in Houston, Texas. And so what we are a supply chain software and data solutions company. We developed essentially digital tools and applications that help to streamline supply chains, workflows, and ultimately to help our customers to collect high integrity data end to end throughout the supply chains. And we'll go through this a bit more, but basically as we get through this presentation, we'll start to understand how blockchain technology is very compelling for a whole bunch of different reasons within a supply chain. In addition to sort of the private sector companies that we typically work with, we're also really fortunate to be able to work in a variety of different ecosystems, both in the nonprofit and academic sectors. So it's a really great opportunity to collaborate and drive innovation with incredible people, visionaries, and of course, to be able to collaborate with Katie and the rest of the team here at Tufts. So lots that we're doing across the value chain, but I would say particularly what we're doing these days, a lot of focus beyond just agriculture. I would say from food to forestry is a lot of the work that we've been doing. And just to highlight, we are also working very closely with the U.S. Endowment for Forestry and Communities. That's North America's largest public charity dedicated to working forests and forest-reliant communities. And again, by virtue of that, we've had a lot of work and on-the-ground experiences across the forestry product value chain. So that's a little bit kind of about us and background. I'm going to touch a little bit on just the platform that we use, and then we're going to dive in to some of the nuts and bolts on blockchain. So GoTrace, this is kind of our flagship platform, and it's essentially a turnkey supply chain data and task management platform. And of course, seamlessly, it works with blockchain and distributed ledgers. For this platform, all you need is a mobile device to get started. And we found that to be really important, and we'll unpack this a bit more in this webinar. But to be able to have this technology be accessible, that's really important. So there's lots of different tools out there, but if you really want transparency in a supply chain, you need to have digital tools that's fully accessible to all stakeholders. And so what we found very simply, if you have a mobile device or a tablet, this is just all you need to begin to start to collect data in your supply chain. And you can see here that just the platform itself, we cover a range of functionality. One, of course, you've got dashboards that will give you all the different insights within your supply chain to be able to map it out. We've got automation tools, and of course, we are able to ingest data from a variety of different areas throughout the entire supply chain, and we seamlessly post certain transactions onto the blockchain ledger. And given all the real-time data that you have, there's a lot of different insights in reporting, and we make that all very functional within the platform. So with that, let's dive into blockchain. So highlighting GoTrace, we point out that blockchain is sort of an integral component to the platform. But the reason we're all tuning in, I think this is the question: what is blockchain? And just to level set, I think we've had a lot of conversations and anecdotes out there. People say, okay, this is interesting, but this is kind of a nice to have. We're going to argue that this is a real must-have in supply chains. But let's unpack this a bit more about what blockchain is. And when we bring up this word, a lot of people tend to gravitate towards a lot of complexities, or they sort of default go to cryptocurrencies. These are all elements within sort of the blockchain ecosystem, but Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies really are just an application of a blockchain solution. But what we're talking about when we say blockchain is really the underlying network that all these different kinds of applications can run on, to include cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. So I used to typically, I'd like to describe blockchain starting out with this kind of imagery. Really, it's just a ledger. You're recording certain data, certain events, certain transactions onto a ledger. But of course, in this case, we're talking about a digital ledger. So sort of like a digital notebook. But this digital notebook has some really unique attributes that make it so compelling to be used in supply chains. So this idea, when we talk about distributed ledger, this is a good graphic I found online. It kind of gives you a sense of the importance of it. And think about this from the lens of authority or control within a network. So starting on my left here, the centralized network, this is very typical for most networks that we're all very used to. Centralized network, you essentially got a single authority, a single control over the entire network. Okay, so there are some efficiencies there, but that also makes it the single point of failure for a lot of networks. And I think that we see this routinely when you hear about these kind of cyber attacks. This is very typical because you've got a single vector for failure. If you move towards the middle, a decentralized network, now you've got a variety of different authorities within the network. So sort of different nodes kind of operating in silo. But there's a little bit more efficiencies here, but there's still very sort of gaps within the network, if you will. And if you go all the way towards the distributed network, there is not a single authority controller. You've got a completely seamless, interconnected network, and the power, the efficiencies of the network are all shared together. So this is the idea that when you start thinking about distributed ledgers, it is this idea that it's democratized when you're talking about access to data, and you've got the ledger, which becomes a shared ledger, which actually becomes a single source of truth amongst all the stakeholders in an ecosystem. And these are some of the benefits that I would say that comes from it. One, because you've got this ledger, that's this shared distributed ledger, it tends to disintermediate. So historically, I would say with most business models, you're requiring our intermediaries. In this case, with blockchain, it really serves to disintermediate. Cost, it really depends on the different kinds of blockchains out there. And we can talk a little bit more about that maybe in the Q&A. But there's all kinds of different blockchains out there. And depending on their use cases, there are different levels of scalability and cost. As I mentioned, centralized networks, they are just sort of a single point of failure, whereas with blockchain, you're talking about a distributed network. So even if you were to lose one node, it wouldn't make a difference because the blockchain or all of this historical chain of events on that blockchain is shared equally amongst all the other nodes. So you lose one node, it doesn't matter because the rest of the network maintains the same integrity of data. And legacy networks, you're talking about a lot of intermediaries. You've got third-party settlement. Blockchain is a lot of it's about speed. You've got instant settlement. And a big topic of this webinar, of course, is around transparency. When you've got centralized or even decentralized, it still tends to be quite opaque. You've got different gatekeepers, if you will, to the data. But when you move towards a real true distributed ledger solution, it's real-time auditable and fully transparent. And again, that blockchain becomes the single source of truth. You don't have multiple copies and versions like we might typically see in Excel spreadsheets. The blockchain data is different. That's a shared data network that everyone has full visibility into. This term consensus is really important when we talk about blockchain. So if you've got this distributed ledger and this distributed network, how do we know that the data is correct? What data is being added onto the blockchain? So this is kind of an example. So perhaps there's an event, maybe that somebody's sending cryptocurrency from one individual to another individual. So the user A sort of initiates a transaction. That transaction gets broadcast to all of the nodes within the network. There are different ways to validate the transaction, but typically there will be a process in which a block of transactions are validated as the true next block to be added to the blockchain. Once that's verified and validated, that block is then immutably added to this ever-growing chain of blocks. And that's it. It becomes sort of 24/7 auditable, and that process just continues to compete in a chronological basis with timestamps just over and over again. So this is kind of how it works. And important to note here is just that this chain will just continue to grow and grow and grow, and so it will always be able to be auditable across all the different nodes in the network. The other thing I'll mention quickly too is that when we talk about blockchain transactions, I think we're very used to the idea about sort of a peer-to-peer transaction. So just again, sending a payment, for example. But in the blockchain world, there's also lots of elements where it's not about payments. Perhaps you're giving consent. Consent can be something that can be timestamped and recorded and then auditable, but it's not a cash payment. And then layer 3, which will become much more applicable when we talk about supply chains, this is something sort of an autonomous, a self-transaction. So think about like an IoT sensor that's passively collecting data and then seamlessly recording that on a blockchain. That's another example. So just to say that there's lots of different ways that we can record events and transactions on a blockchain well beyond payments. And finally, I just wanted to highlight smart contracts. This is just very simply self-executing code. So it's a computer code, but it's defined having certain parameters. So I like to describe it kind of like an if-then construct. If something happens, then it will trigger something else. So this kind of computer code is important, and I would say particularly on supply chains, because it tends to automate processes, and all the stakeholders are very clear on what this if-then parameter is. So for example, if something is delivered, then you get paid. So this computer code will do all this and then seamlessly record the event, the transaction on the ledger for auditability. And this has a lot of potential for really streamlining supply chains, and also to make it very transparent and clear and fair among all the different stakeholders in a supply chain. So this is, I would say, just at a very high level, some of the benefits and efficiencies and transparency elements that make blockchain so compelling in supply chains. Okay, so I know we kind of moved through that relatively quickly here. I'm checking time. So what does this all have to do with food supply chains, right? So we've kind of talked about this technology, and I would argue when we talk about blockchain, one of the most compelling use cases, in addition to say payments, is using this technology in supply chains. So back to that question, nice to have or must have. Well, let's talk a little bit more about this. The reality is that we have a lot of challenges in broadly in supply chains, but specifically, I would say in food supply chains. There was a recent study report done by Geodis that suggested that only 6% of enterprises or companies claim to have full visibility in their supply chain. So that obviously is very low, which suggests that most companies simply don't have full visibility in their supply chain. When you don't have visibility, of course, you're talking about a tremendous amount of risk and potential liabilities. If you just look at some of these stats here, almost $1 trillion in inefficiencies, particularly around food waste. That's where a lot of that number is coming from. And then when you talk about, authenticity, counterfeit goods, fraud, food fraud, it's very significant. It ranges from $30 to $50 billion a year. So we've got a lot of challenges, and if you layer in the fact that we're pursuing sustainability, regenerative ag, You've got all kinds of other regulatory concerns. And again, just to have empowering our harvesters and producers and having more of a direct relationship with consumers, there's a lot of different issues that centers around the idea that we not only need transparency, but we really need high integrity, auditable data in our supply chains. And what we're talking about typically today, you're mostly, especially upstream, you're talking about paper and Excel spreadsheets. This is moving away towards a digital format. And again, one that you can rely upon, which is time-stamped, immutably recorded data on a ledger, irreversible, and again, 24/7 auditable. So this is sort of where we move towards forward-looking when we talk about transparency and auditability in supply chains, starting at the point of harvest. Say you've got a farm or a ranch, to be able to collect data within those geo coordinates, and as you do the harvest, you start to transport these commodities or goods downstream. Every step of the way, the chain of custody, the provenance, and whatever else data is important, if you're talking about scope 3 emissions, all of that can be real-time recorded and again seamlessly posted on the ledger for a variety of different data streams. And important to say too is that as you're tracking all of the movement of these goods, you're also collecting other data for regulatory compliance, to have a very close look at all the different waste streams if you're moving more towards a sort of a zero waste solution and circularity objectives. And important, I would say, at the point of delivery or point of consumption, to be able to have that unique relationship between our harvesters, producers, and folks at the end at the retail sector, to know where your food came from, and also to understand how it's harvested and to have a better appreciation of food. This just gives you a full variety of what can happen with better data. But at the end of the day, we need this kind of good data, defensible, reliable data, in order to pursue any of these objectives throughout our food value chain. So I'm going to go through a few examples, and then we'll have a good discussion after this. But this is Terra Delissa. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but a year ago, I had purchased this olive oil very simply because they prominently put on the labeling that they use blockchain traceability. So I wanted to take a look at it and get a sense of how it works. And I thought they've done a really good job to help tell the story about this particular product, but backed by blockchain authenticated data. These kind of examples, I like to put in the category sort of as a digital product passport. So at certain nodes throughout the life cycle or the product journey, they are collecting all kinds of information and putting that on the blockchain. And in this particular case, at the consumer level, to be able to scan a QR code to understand that story from where, in this case, the olives came from and how they were processed and ultimately to be able to be consumed at the retail sector. But you can see here that there are 8 different QA checkpoints that they've recorded through that entire product value chain, and ultimately to be able to tell that story. Olive oil, as some of you may know, is one of the most sort of food fraudulent products out there. So unfortunately, it's really sort of in the top 10. So to be able to have that transparency and visibility and give consumer confidence about a premium product is really, really important. These are just some of the other steps that were recorded sort of in this blockchain-based digital product passport. Another example I want to give, and this is work that we were doing with an organization called Two Hands out of Australia. They're now operating in the UK as well as in Australia. But in this case, we're talking about southern rock lobsters. So these lobsters, through the two-hand solution, they essentially tag each one of them with a you can see there that the tagging with a unique QR code, and used our solution to be able to scan that QR code from the point of catch all the way downstream at a variety of key chain of custody events, to record not only the physical movement of the data, but also additional data to support the quality, the integrity, and the trade of this particular southern rock lobster. And you can see here in the schematic that they put together, you've got this Two Hands marketplace that has these particular curated seafood products. And then to be able for the consumer ultimately to be able to scan this QR code to see that entire product journey. And again, all of that backed by blockchain authenticated data. In this example, this was covered by Forbes China. You can see here that the particular consumer is scanning the QR code when they were served This was at in Shanghai at the Waldorf Astoria on the Bund. And it was a signature dish. And again, it was a great example of how you can tell the story and also to bring a closer, appreciation and also just to have a closer dynamic between the end consumer and the original, again, in this case, the folks out there catching these lobsters. And again, to know that the integrity of this lobster and the freshness, and they can see the timestamps all the way from the point of catch to when it was finally served to the consumer. Another example here that we thought was pretty cool was this block rice. This is a project that's been going on, I believe, since 2018, and it's focusing on rice, but particularly for farmers and cooperatives from Cambodia. And in this example, you've got the same kind of flavor of this kind of digital product passport. So collecting data at key points throughout the supply chain. But in this example, they're also using smart contracts. And so if you remember, I highlighted earlier the idea that you can use this self-executing computer code once certain triggers are met to be able to initiate a follow-on action. And all of these steps are then recorded and auditable on the blockchain. In this case, as the rice was being sort of harvested and processed, all the different key stakeholders could have full visibility as to what was happening. In this case, you're talking about beyond the farmers and the cooperatives, you're talking about the exporters, the importers, and the folks who need to validate this particular organic rice, where it came from. And once certain data was collected and validated, it initiated a trigger for payment. And that was really, really important. And also serve to eliminate the need for certain intermediaries, both in terms of processing transactions and also sort of those data gatekeepers. So again, this blockchain becomes that single source of truth where all the different stakeholders can rely upon. And then it also drives the additional element of efficiencies. And again, a sort of a better example of how we can empower our harvesters and producers and make sure they're getting a fair shake in these kind of supply chain transactions. For these particular farmers, very simple. They had a mobile device was all they needed to begin to start to collect the data at the point of harvest, and that's was the way for them to have a better livelihood through this process. And again, they've gone through piloting and implementation, so this is something that looks very promising for this particular these farmer communities and cooperatives. Another case I want to highlight is the work that we've done with Sinclair. This was when we launched this became the world's first automated high-speed packing house solution. So if you think about the idea of using a mobile device to scan, say, a lobster, what happens when you have 10,000 avocados? So this is sort of this idea of having a scalable solution, but then still being able to record these key events on the blockchain. In this case, we're talking about batched produce. So coming through sort of a high packing conveyor belt with this unique labeling, as it's being passively scanned, you've got all this batch data that's being recorded on the back end and also seamlessly posted to the ledger. So this is just another example to show you high integrity data, but also the efficiencies that can be scaled up through a blockchain-based solutions. So this is actually one of Sinclair's machines you can see here and how the labels are going on these avocados. And again, just very seamlessly, you've got all this batch data that's being recorded on chain. And then downstream, this will give you the opportunity to not only have a better understanding of your product, but also there's areas in terms of compliance and recalls, lots of data that can be 24/7 auditable. Lastly, I want to focus on the great work that we've been doing with Pro Natura. As I mentioned, it's the sort of largest and oldest conservation group in Mexico. And we've got Juan Roberto Baez here, which I mentioned is our sustainable value chains coordinator for Pro Natura, and going to be able to share some of the comments and his experiences on the use of the technology. But we've been really fortunate to be able to work with Juan and the rest of their team at Pro Natura. Initially, we focused on basically spiny lobster, and also some purple sea urchins, which is somewhat of an invasive species in terms of forest kelps and reefs, and to be able to work on improving sustainability practices while also working on some conservation strategies, and putting all that data real time, all track and trace, and all putting that on chain for auditability, and again, to help tell that story. And another big project that we've been working with them is to really highlight and and pursue sustainability and conservation strategies around protecting the vaquita marina, which is the most endangered mammal on the planet. I think there's estimates that there's only 10 to 20 left in existence. So how do we reward and empower those who are fishing out there to fish sustainably and say not use gill nets, and also to pursue, say, these totawaba fish, which results in the illegal bycatch of the vaquita marina. So a lot of really, really cool work. I could describe it, but I think it's much better for Juan to be able to share his experiences, and then we can certainly move from there to open up to Q&A. So Juan, yeah, I want to welcome you to share your comments, and I'm happy to navigate on the slides from here on out. Oh,
Thank you.
and got a couple QR codes here if anybody wants to see this. These are just some great publications and articles that ProNatura has put out. So this might be just some good reference materials if you want to do some additional work later, just to see what the great work that ProNatura is doing. So, okay, sorry about that, Juan. Let me hop over here. Here you go.
Thank you, Henry. Good morning, or good evening, everyone. I'm really honored to join this conversation on blockchain and food systems. I want to share with you a case from Northwest Mexico where Chainparency and ProNatura collaborating. ProNatura, we have been working for decades with artisanal fishing communities, and together with Chainparency, we're exploring how the benefits of blockchain and traceability adds up to conservation processes by empowering fisheries, and protecting marine ecosystems, and connecting sustainable products with value-aligned markets. Can you help me with the next one, Rick?
Yep.
I'll give you some context. The Gulf of California and the Pacific coast of Mexico in the northwest part of our country are globally important fishing regions, as well as per high biodiversity and cultural richness. Artisanal fisheries are central to local economies and culture of the people, but these fisheries face deep challenges, such as lack of formal data, vulnerability of illegal fishing, fragile governance of cooperatives, and difficulties entering the traceable and transparent supply chains. This often leaves small producers invisible and undervalued in the seafood economy. That usually ends up with one and only option for fishers, but to sell their products at a low cost with local intermediaries. To address this, ProNatura, with Chainparency, we're using GoTrace in fisheries. Initially as a digital traceability tool. That way we can record essential data as who were fishing, where, how, and how the product was handled. It really works well in the field. It creates a digital identity for each step involved in the supply chain. But more importantly, we're using GoTrace as a market-based tool. It helps communities and to build credibility with responsible buyers and tell a story of sustainability that adds up to real value for their products. GoTrace and P&O's strategy and traceability efforts fits into a larger strategy. In our structure of ProNatura, we have a big sustainable fisheries coordination where it supports 7 fishery improvement projects. We strengthen cooperative governance and promote traceability, not just for control, but as a bridge between communities and sustainable market. It's about making the invisible visible. We're trying to recognize responsible fishing involving good practices and community values in fishing, and transforming how artisanal seafood is valued and accessed in the market. By integrating GoTrace with Chainparency blockchain platform, we ensure that this data is secure, it's transparent, and it's tamper-proof. And every entry from the GPS coordinates where we trace all the fishing routes and up to the gear type used in the fishing, it's very verifiable and auditable. Blockchain gives to the producers a control over their information, and it gives buyers and consumers the confidence that what they are seeing, the information is real, the information is truth. That involves their storytelling from data to consumers and providing the fishermen security of their whole data. This, and Henry mentioned it a few moments ago, this is especially critical in sensitive areas such as the upper Gulf of California. There is the home of the vaquita marina, where is critically endangered, the most rare mammal in the world. Here, GoTrace and ProNatura, we help cooperatives to show their fishing activities are legal, they're selective, and they're not harming the vaquita marina's habitat. We traced the fishing routes and registered critical data to the fish of this fishing day, as well as their practices and involving all the actors in the supply chain. If we could really see like a little polygon inside the right part of the water in the map, that's the zero tolerance exclusive area for Vaquita Marina, and we trace the water so fishermen could we could see if they go inside that area or they should uh, take a turn around it. And then with buyers like El Sargazo, who is committed with sourcing from traceable low impact fisheries, and then with these kind of actors and these alignments, these efforts turn into real economic opportunities for the fishermen and for distributors like El Sargazo, who with better value to the products and therefore better income for the fishermen. Uh, in another area, can we change the slide, please? Yep. Thank you, Henry. Looking ahead in Baja Sur, we're actively building new networks with different actors from the supply chain to connect to the market for the Barrett Sand base. We're working with the Punta Abreojos cooperative, and one of our key partners is Felsa Pacific, a company that is helping us to bring traceable seafood to responsible buyers into southwest of the US. We use platforms like GoTrace so we can show the journey data in real time. We show the species, the catch method, the handling, the date time for the catch arriving land, and with all that, it's all very verifiable by scanning a QR code. This level of transparency helps small-scale producers to compete and position their products with sustainability-driven global market. But we're still facing some challenges to connect to better markets in the US. In this case of Punta Abreojos, we need to increase the volume in retail stores so they could face their losses to market behavior for other fishing products that the cooperative has. And it has been like a loss for the last couple of years. Also, because of their position in almost in the expense of the Pacific, they are at the expense of hurricanes almost every year. So we need to level up the volume and increase sales of high quality sustainable seafoods from Punta Abreojos in the US. To scale this impact, we need to invest in simple field-ready technology. We need more committed buyers who want to source responsibility. And most important, we need an alignment with all the actors in the supply chain. And that's a call for action to scale up for this kind of efforts that we are impulsing and accompanying with the cooperatives and actors as Chainparency and El Sargazo and Punta Abreojos and all the fishers in that are committed to provide to the consumers true, reliable, traceable, and high quality products. We need to open up the market for them. And let me close with this thought and in a final reflection. Like, we think sustainability begins with being responsible, and that also means telling the truth behind every fish that we provide. Blockchain helps us to bring that truth to the light, and it gives us a way to rebuild trust in seafood for consumer. That way, the communities that and in the communities that harvest is responsible. Well, I really thank you for all your time, and that's what I have to share with you. Thank you, Henry.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
all.
much, Juan.
Awesome. That's fantastic. I have so many questions and thoughts, Henry and Juan. That was amazing. I'm going to start it off with the questions, and it starts with something you said, Juan, around buyers need to value this. And Eric, I'm thinking about you and your communications and marketing world. Um, I mean, Henry, is this about regulation? I think about GDPR and how it forced a lot of, standardization in the cybersecurity world. I mean, is this about the stick coming down and saying transparency is going to be required? It's but the carrot seems so huge to me. I mean, 536 billion, 50 billion, those are almost a trillion in numbers of inefficiency. So if the numbers and savings aren't big enough to inspire everyone to go here, not to mention you said recalls. Think about the millions and billions of dollars that's in product loss from product recalls that maybe with transparency, traceability could be done more efficiently. I can't figure out in my head the carrot and the stick on this, right? Is it going to have to be a heavy-handed regulation, or is there just so much undeniable incentive to do this? And are we, Eric, just maybe not telling the story well? Like, is the consumer not getting it? So this way, I open that up, but interested in people's thoughts on that, and Henry, and what in your industry, how you guys approach that.
Yeah, I'm happy to just throw some comments out first, and yeah, definitely excited to hear from everybody else. I would say it seems to be a no-brainer that it should be carrot and not the stick. Compliance is usually the stick. But I would say, and I've mentioned this a few times here, that there's a real disconnect, I think, throughout the supply chain. And there's no end to the data requirements that we have upstream. It's growing more and more. But I think there hasn't been a proper alignment, economic incentives between, say, our harvesters, producers, our landowners, our haulers. Those are all players that are integral to have that transparency throughout the supply chain. So I think there's more that needs to be done, because there's a lot of, it ranges from lack of economics, distrust. There's some issues out there that makes it difficult for the to collect that data at scale. So if you talk to a lot of the downstream buyers and producers, they're going to tell you that they have information, but if you dig a little deeper, they actually don't have a lot of that data upstream. And so it's finding a way to make that happen. So technology is one part of that solution, making these tools accessible, again, moving away from paper and Excel spreadsheets. That's one part of it. But we also need to look at how do we incentivize people to do it. And as Juan has pointed out, these cooperatives, they believe, why are they doing it? They believe that by using these technologies, that it's going to empower them, and hopefully that results in premium pricing and unlocks new opportunities in new markets. So there needs to be some better alignment there. The stick is difficult sometimes because folks will be resistant, and we're seeing that now. There's a lot of very significant compliance, regulatory compliance coming down, and a lot of pushback on it. So
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, other thoughts, questions?
I could add something up that Henry brought up. In Mexico, there's no legal requirement for traceability. So what we're trying to do, or we're trying to connect with this asset of having the information and having the registers and something, is to use it as an attractive incentive that new buyers and consumers could be using it, since we have these traces and these routes, and you see the map that Dickett showed the origin of their products, and it's really attractive. It really connects with people. So that's why we're trying to make a turn to use traceability and blockchain information for as a market tool base, so it could open up some markets in Mexico where it's not required legally the traceability, but in the US we have all these compliances, and we're already aligned to it. So we're looking also for the US markets to open up for this kind of sustainable fishery.
Mm. Eric, where are we as a US market in being able to market something front of pack around traceability and people paying a premium for that?
Well, I think sort of we're close and sort of we're really far away. I mean, just so everybody knows, I'm a writer, I'm a copywriter, I'm a marketing writer, and I specialize in helping brands tell a story that the consumer doesn't even know they want to hear, but is really compelling once they hear it. Um, we all have this subconscious mind, and I think most of us, especially in America, don't want to think about it. We like to think that we're in complete control of everything we think and do, which is, to me is ludicrous. But we do have these motivations and these drives and these little, voices, if you will, that speak to us. And I think when it comes to food, especially, our biggest sort of unmet need is feeling like we have the absolute right to believe that we can be healthy or that we can achieve our body composition goals or anything else like that. So for me, this is, I mean, and Henry, I guess I have a question for you before I continue. That $935 billion or whatever that's in inefficiencies, who gets that as more efficiency occurs? Is it the people that are making or producing and finding in the food?
Yeah, so when I looked into those numbers, a lot of that number was driven by food waste. So if you think about how we can be more efficient in distribution of food, that waste can also be upcycled, but potentially for bioenergy. I think there's a lot that we can do there to better manage our food supply, our food stock, and
That's
that will
being
certainly have. Oh,
lost.
sorry, go ahead, Katie.
I'm saying that's just being written off as a loss right now, then, what you're saying.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean,
So
Well,
I think.
if who gets it? I mean, if it's just being
Yeah.
written off as a loss on people's accounting of their business practices, that's like it.
well, there's not a lot. There's not a lot of margin in the grocery business. It's a very low margin business, so it's not being written off. It's being charged to the consumer. It's being built into ultimately to the price of products that we pay. Walmart's the largest grocer in the world. I think their net margin is somewhere between 3 and 5%, and they're actually one of the best at it. There's not a lot of room to write off food waste. So it gets built into the cost of the product, which means it gets built into the price of the product, which means the consumer pays for it.
Hmm.
So you have to ask yourself the question. So I'm not a, I think there are isolated circumstances where some of these products, like the two hands example, where you can charge a premium price, but that's not the norm. That's a small subset of the total marketplace. Where the benefit would be is that if you eliminated that food waste, that part of that would go back into shareholder profits, which would be the incentive for the shareholders to invest in the technology to save the money. And part of it would go to the consumer in terms of cost savings or reducing inflation. And I'm like Henry, I don't believe that regulation, and again, in the United States today anyway, under the current administration, regulation is a dirty word. I don't believe that regulation should be the driving factor. I think it should be about efficiency in the supply chain, cost savings, ultimately saving the consumer, and ultimately providing benefits to the shareholder in the form of profits.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
for
that's
me, it would be, I'm sorry, Katie.
no, go ahead, Eric.
No, I was just, those are two carrots, right? And for me, the way to communicate with people, it's funny. I mean, this is not my bailiwick. I mean, traceability and supply chain, transparency. It's something else, but I see a connection. And it's when transparency is honesty. And when you're honest, especially from a brand perspective, and I think most people want to, in some way, trust brands. And I think people do like connecting sort of with certain brands. But I feel like most of them, unfortunately, are not that honest. Um, it's because of our system, right? I've got to get you to click and I've got to get you to buy and then I've got to get you to buy again. But if there was a way for the brands that are using the Go Trace technology to open a communication line with their consumers, and say, hey, this is what we're doing and this is why we're doing it. We're doing it for us, but we're doing it for you. Do you know what I mean? That's sort of like that's just that statement, which I just came up with off the top of my head, so it's not that great. Um, but it's an example of the thing that I think people who have money to spend really want, you know?
Well, Eric, let's talk about. I mean, Hadley and I are constantly in conversations where we hear about the people who don't have money to spend and how the world is creating premium products that the people who have less money will never be able to afford. Now,
Well,
what you've just described and what Steve has just described actually is being able to potentially create a more premium food supply chain that people can afford.
yeah,
If this is what we're saying is through this kind of technology, we could actually find cost savings, bring prices down, and offer the general public better, higher integrity products. We would have reduced some of this like ages old equity argument that we're having of this, we're going to call it, quote, the whole food shopper and the everyone else shopper, right? I mean,
for sure. I mean, I think in our world, at least in this world of America, I think that there's a very distinct message that most people get. And that is if you want to talk about health, or if you want to talk about weight loss, or you want to talk about better nutrition, or you want to talk getting away from chronic diseases, most of the people that would hear that message would either subconsciously or consciously think that's only for rich people,
mm,
or that's only for white people, or that's only. I think it's very easy for us as humans to sort of disqualify ourselves based on something that we are or have, or you know what I mean, from something else. So for me, it's all about like, I mean, blockchain, Henry. I mean, that was a great description of what it really is. I think cryptocurrency has sort of like poisoned the idea of it because it seems sleazy and weird, and um, but I think the idea of using technology and advanced technology to help ordinary people do better is like a really cool idea that could be communicated by you, by the food suppliers, and to the people that you. It's the way we've gotten into the mess that we've gotten into in America in the first place, is not listening to the people sort of that don't have a lot of money to spend.
yeah, yeah. Ramesh, I saw that you came off of silent. What do you got?
Hi, Katie. I'm a big, huge fan of Henry and Steve. I know them for a long time, and it's great to see the case studies, Henry, and the progress that you have been making. I think it's something I'm very familiar with, having known both this gentleman, but also I think everything that you talked about in terms of the branding. Um, I fell into sustainability quite a while back, 20, maybe 25 years back. And over the years, because I've been building a lot of data businesses and helping a lot of data um, oriented solutions in the market. Most recently, I noticed that now we have on a backlash on sustainability. We all know that branding wise, we're seeing that in US as well as maybe a little bit in Europe, but mostly in US. And what you touched upon, the olive oil story, Henry, really resonated with me. 15 years back or something, I looked at the olive oil industry and I was trying to figure out, can I deliver, like we have the wine, the ratings for the wine industry. I was trying to figure out, can I create a rating for olive oil industry because how corrupted that industry is. And I think that's still an opportunity for you because of what you have been doing with maybe a few of the producers. And I'm happy to share some of my insights on that. But what Eric talked about and Katie, you brought up about, the challenge is with branding. What is the value proposition that we need now with all the pushback that we are seeing in the market? The greenwashing or the ESG washing that is, we have BlackRock stepping back, we have EPS stepping back. All these are kind of heavy signals, right? These were the bedrocks that we had before, which provided us level of, I don't want to call it that protection, or maybe headwinds that the sustainability movement had, that was giving a lot of the momentum over the years. Now we have that kind of on a wane now. So going back to what Eric you brought up, I think for the consumers, I've been doing some research on, the reason I joined this was I know Henry, of course, I love him. But food security, I think, it's a big challenge out there. And for the lower end of the market, if you want to call it that, or say if you put that in a pyramid and say the top tier took care of themselves, we have over processed foods, undernourishment. Okay, these or if you want to call, I don't want to use the political words for this, but food deserts, right, that are there. We need to address these problems with solutions that make it meaningful, and also provide tools to the people who can make or influence the change that we need. I'm not talking about politics. I'm just talking about helping people have nourishment, for better food solutions, lower cost of supply chain for food. And I think what Henry is doing is wonderful. Also, the work Steve has been doing from his academic side has been wonderful. And we need solutions that target these specific areas, like industry solutions, or maybe on the demand side too, right? Henry is applying solutions on the supply side. We need solutions on the demand side too. And also, if you have been noticing what is happening, because of Eric, you talked about the work you do. The brand association on sustainability was big for the last few years. That broke down now completely, right? You see companies like WPP who are big on the biggest ad company in the market. And I was trying to get them as a client last few years back. I was really going after them. And then now we see change of guard there. They're really kind of diluting their positioning. They were on the forefront of pushing sustainability as an ad firm across all of the markets. Now we're seeing all of that headwind is breaking down, right? So we need to ask ourselves, what is the new value proposition? A. Two, who are the levers, or how do we create new headwind is what we need to figure out.
Well,
right?
Ramesh,
On the demand side. I hope I didn't take too much time, but thank you.
Oh, this is brilliant. You're totally right. And, Eric and I have a common friend who's on the council, Ellen Brown. And Ellen and I talk all the time about food as health and food as medicine. So what's interesting is I'm thinking about that, and I'm thinking about the healthcare industry trying to find a way to deliver healthy and affordable to patients battling chronic disease. And so how do the risk adjusters, the actuarials on the healthcare side, realize that through solutions like this, they need to be a part of this conversation, because there's a self-interest in bringing the cost of healthy down. And that's on the demand side, right? Which seems really important. Yeah.
I think if you're able to tie it together, I'm doing work on health, food equity from the demand side. I'm doing some work on that. It's at a research stage. We're trying to explore some grants in that. I've never done grants before, so I'm trying to figure it out. But the trick on the insurance side and the health impact side, they need hard data.
Yeah.
Okay. They need hard data at a very granular level, and we are trying to develop that. And Henry, I've been wanting to talk to you for months. This is
Ramesh, first, it's so good to see you, and we've got a lot to catch up on. And just great commentary and insights that you're seeing. It so complements, I think, this discussion. And Eric, something you just mentioned too. A lot of the anecdotes that I've been hearing recently, it is about how to redefine what sustainability means going forward. There's a lot of talk about what sustainability actually is. And so one thing that we've always said, and I think this is still holding true, is that we always view our customers as champions of transparency, right? There's a lot of folks who will be very resistant to be transparent. But by the way, it's not nefarious. There's a whole host of reasons why it's difficult. But there are leaders who say, you know what, strategically, transparency is really, really important. And we've heard, even though there's a lot of noise going on right now and confusion, there are a lot of buyers, for example, that are still saying, we are going to stick true to what we believe is right, in terms of the environment, in terms of sustainability. And these are going to be our practices buying going forward, irrespective of what happens and with administrations, with sort of uncertainties. So I think it's having a long view of what this really means, but there is definitely a lot of chatter about what does sustainability even mean. And I think people are calibrating around that narrative, just in this current moment of uncertainty. But like a lot of discussion here is what's right, we were talking about nutrient dense foods, having accessibility, right sizing these economics so people can get healthy, nutritious food. Yeah, we need to be really clear and transparent about that. And I think there's unfortunately been quite a bit of bad marketing to all of us. I think we've come to believe certain foods are nutrient dense, and there's a different story to it. So, yeah.
There's just so much great language. I think about your blockchain, your distributed network. I mean, the data is for everyone in that. And what we're trying to do is make health or nutrition or cost savings or whatever you want to put for everyone. So there's one. And then there's the whole idea of sustainability. I mean, what we're trying to sustain is our species. I mean, the earth will be fine. What we're trying to sustain is us. So the word is also too long and complicated for most people. It also sort of like takes you into the hippie zone. I have a belief that as long as the more of your own personal needs you're able to check off, the more likely you are to care about something like the climate, right? But for most people, they've got too much on their plate, pardon the pun, already. So if we can make sustainability about you, what we're trying to sustain is your budget, your health, your, not having to worry about your children anymore, about, the way they're eating and things like that. So I think there's some nice metaphors and some shared language that could really help this. And trying to make it a movement, taking it to the larger audience, everything can be mapped on a bell curve. Who's talking to the people in the middle?
Eric, one of the ventures we are developing is around nourishment, just simply nourishment, right? And I came up with that because I wanted to get away from all the negativity that's going on right now around sustainability. Even when we talk about food security, it's so loaded politically, and we need to find not just positive messaging, but we need to find ways to bring people together, irrespective of their positions. And I think that's the challenge from the messaging point of view that we have to all figure out. The technical abilities that Henry is talking about is been there for a while.
Yeah.
And he has built a great platform which is much more cost effective than many of the other blockchains. Okay, so the technical ability is not what we need to worry about. That has been sold and oversold and hyped, and people lost their sense of what blockchain is about. What we need is a different messaging that has to bring people together. That, I think, is what is missing in the market right now.
I love that. I mean, what my friend Ellen, who Katie mentioned, is talking about, and what my wife, who's involved in an urban farming nonprofit, Linda always says, food is a right. And to take Ramesh, your sort of build on that, nourishment is a right. Right? I mean, a bag of potato chips, you could argue, is food, but it's not nourishing. It's like I'm only maybe 20% fed. Whereas if I had something that was more nutritious, even if it was convenience based or fun to eat or any of these things that we sort of all want, I could still get more fed. Which I think is really important to tell to people that that's what we want, because you get fed, all of a sudden your risk of chronic disease goes down. Your risk of all these terrible things we hear about in the news goes down. And why shouldn't everyone have that right?
But price and taste are going to continue to be king.
Always.
think on the messaging, regardless of health and sustainability and honesty and traceability, you're going to go there first. So if it's the best price plus, like people will shop for honest, traceable, sustainable, healthy if price is first, price and taste are met. Those boxes have to be checked. So where this
Taste,
tie into
yeah.
that, I think it's brilliant.
Taste is always first. I used to work on a brand called Atkins, you know, Dr. Atkins, who had
They're on.
invented the low carb diet, and we would talk to people about how you could so easily change your body composition just by cutting out the bread or the potato, and people routinely would say, "Yeah, but I can't give up my pasta." And who can blame them?
Great. I wouldn't give up
Eric,
pasta.
if I may, one more thing you touched upon briefly is the trust erosion that we had around sustainability. And if you're doing the work that you're talking about, if we can find ways to kind of, is there a way to rebuild the trust? I think we need to figure that out in these solutions that are there. I think the solutions are there, but how do we get people to re-engage on the idea of sustainability? Maybe that is not the objective, but the solutions that they could get from engaging through this common theme that you can define. And then there are solutions like the one Chainparency is supporting with all their clients, and there are many others who are there. Bringing those together in a way more as a collective to deliver on that. I think that it needs to be a collective effort. I don't know what is happening with all this disruption that's happening at the stage.
I'm sorry to be talking so much, but Ramesh, you gave me another idea. It's for me, it's all about the idea of, do you believe you have the right to blank? Taste, cost, nutrition, health, longevity, whatever you want. Because I really think that when most things are served up, because most things seem to be served up sort of naturally to people that look like us, not people who are sort of like in the middle of that bell curve. And I think it's so easy to look at things that are served up to somebody with more money or somebody who's in the majority or blah, blah, blah. It's so easy for ordinary, and I don't mean that in a pejorative way, but most people to say, I don't get that. I don't get to have that. And so I think it may be, I'm kind of a one-trick pony, Johnny One Note here, but it really does feel to me like, if you can disqualify yourself for whatever it is, you no longer have interest in it, and you might even become an enemy of it. But if you can be brought in and invited in and repeatedly be told, you have a right to this. You're a human being, you have a right to this, and we're helping you get it. And the food brands that we support are helping you get it. So I don't know, if we could just get $1 billion or so for a public service campaign, we'd be fine.
I love that, Eric, and so we'll shake the trees and see what comes out. I think this is such an illuminating conversation. Henry, I think one of the things we need to do is make sure that we're connecting your work to the Food is Health working group, because I do think on the demand side there's a really interesting conversation to be pulled in between the two conversations and to nutrition security. So I think we should be linking both of those conversations more intentionally, which we haven't done. And then we just got to keep telling the stories. I mean, Juan, I was so grateful you told the story of what you're doing in Mexico. It's the real life case studies are so helpful. And so we have to keep doing that. I recognize that we're a bit over in our time. But Henry, I just want to give you the last word as we close out this great lunch and learn.
Yeah, again, thank you so much. It's towards the end of the conversation, we were talking about trust. Our mission is, we say, to restore trust through community and technology. That is our mission. Technology plays a role in it. And I think from what we believe we ought to have, transparency and validating these claims, all these kind of things are essential for, especially I would say, for our food supply chain. So I think many different people mentioned on this call about how we can all collaborate and work together to make this a reality at scale. So yeah, let's just keep the dialogue moving. And I appreciate everyone's attention and contribution in this discussion today.